Welcome YouTube, welcome Facebook, welcome Instagram. So sorry for the technical glitch earlier. We are now live. There he is, Lawrence. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, Chris. It's a little bit stressful because indeed technical glitches on both ends, which is always fascinating.
Not to
But
worry.
always good to be here.
Always good to be here with you. So today I wanted to talk about failure of courage in action. I had kind of started previously and created a little bit of a warm up, but I was so busy playing with multiple keyboards that I think I was rambling. So I'm sober now. Everything is good once again. We want to talk about failure of courage in action. Here's the premise of this week's episode, by the way. If you didn't listen, you should check it out. The idea is this: when we have agile failure, we focus so much on the blame of leadership in terms of they're not engaged or they're not supportive or they don't understand agile well enough, or we blame a product owner that's poorly divided across multiple initiatives, a team that's not fully engaged and not conscripted, they're not buying in, they're resistant. All of those things are reasons that we cite for why agile continuously fails. But at this point, it's serious. Like, I'm going to be blunt. We keep reporting when we see the state of agile reports that come up from various groups, whether they're commercial or non-commercial, that failure for agile transformations is hovering around 60 to 70%, excuse me. Which, if you go back in time to the waterfall days, those are exactly the same metrics. 2/3 of projects fail, 80% of features are built, never get used. So we need something better. And hence, a whole bunch of guys hang out in a ski chalet and say, we must do better. So we have a choice now: either stop repeating the same mistakes, because the reasons for failure before agile are pretty much the same as the reasons now, or we invent something new and say agile was to a point interesting but failed experiment. Throw your certifications away, all your investment in agility away, throw away your Jira knowledge, all those things, erase all your tickets, because we're going to do something completely new. So to my mind, it's time to stop shifting from process to process, framework to framework, but instead to address the real problem, which is when the time comes to do agile things, it requires courage. That courage is hard to find. It's not properly rewarded or reinforced within organizations. And I think most people really don't know, have never been trained on how to be courageous. You've been trained on how to do stand ups. You've been trained on how to use retrospective planning poker cards, all those things. You've been trained on how to use the talking stick or the wiffle ball or whatever you all use in your meetings, but you haven't been trained how to speak truth to power. You haven't been trained how to speak truth to your team. You haven't been trained on how to say the hard things and have the difficult conversations. So welcome everyone who's joining us on Instagram. Sorry for the technical glitch. If you're here, it's great to see you. Lawrence, what do you think?
Well, first thing on my mind here is actually we've been trained to do the exact opposite, right? We've been trained to not tell truth to power because it'll maybe cost us our job. But we've been trained to not tell truth to everyone because it's
Mm-hmm.
impolite or in some other way, shape, or form something that is risky.
Yeah.
And it is. Let's be honest about it. It is. It could cost you
Mm-hmm.
your job, and
Yep.
that's exactly why you should do it. If you ever want to have a really wonderful job that you would actually like your friends to have as well, it is time to how to put it best. I think it's time to act like a badass.
A little bit. I agree. So what's that mean to you?
Well, what that means to me is that I need to step over um, my personally really well honed sense of imposter syndrome. I'm always thinking, who
Mm,
am I to teach anybody about this? I only have like 20 years of experience and all the certificates and all that stuff. And of course, getting all the certificates is a signal of actually an anti pattern there because you really shouldn't need all those certificates to talk truth and focus on the techniques and doing them well and all that stuff. It really doesn't matter if you're not telling the truth
mm-hmm.
all the time as a
Right.
habit.
Right, right. So that requires courage. And I'm going to give an example where if I go to one of my customers, especially the executive level. So let's imagine that first things first, if you're doing something with an organization of scale, so big company with thousands, tens of thousands of people, you're going to struggle with agility. You're going to encounter that lack of leadership support problem, largely because agile hasn't been communicated to the executive well, so they don't know what it does, how it does it. They don't understand what's required to support it, and it's possible that they don't know what they need to do, the step-by-step things to make it successful.
Hmm.
When that happens, that's a failure on us. First thing, it's a failure of the practitioners to not have those conversations. So if you're an agile coach or scrum master, it really doesn't matter what your role is. Someone on the team has to be communicating and saying, this is what's required and this is what you can expect. It's reasonable to say we'll go faster or we won't go faster. It's reasonable to say we'll improve quality or we won't. Whatever your most desired outcome is, whatever your target is, you communicate, okay, if this is important to you, I'm going to need you involved. I'm going to need you subscribed and conscripted. For that to happen, we're going to need to talk. We're going to need to talk regularly. So, assuming that you've had the courage to build that relationship in the first place, like if you are a coach and you're not regularly meeting with your leadership team, something's wrong. The first thing you have to do is say, if we can't have these conversations regularly, once every 2 weeks, once a week for 10 minutes, this thing will fail because I need to understand, am I helping you hit your targets? That's the most important thing in all agile initiatives is
And
to
you're saying
remember.
something worth repeating
Sure.
just for good effect, because you're not saying, if you don't do this, I can't do my job properly,
Mhm.
which is interestingly how I started saying this to begin with, which is
Mhm.
why I know to now pause you for a bit. It's really important to get the language right here,
Mhm.
because you're talking to people who don't care that you can or cannot do your job. That's not their job. Their
Right.
job's to create the system.
Right.
Your job's to make sure this system will fail. The
Mhm.
system you have hired me to make work will fail if
Right.
we don't do this differently. That's
Right.
a whole different message. It sounds like it's the same, but it's a different thing. And they'll
Well, explain
listen
that.
differently.
Tell me more.
Well, why it's different, or
Yep. Yeah, tell
well,
me what the difference is. Like what if I don't like to give people scripts because a script that works for one organization might not work for another. But what's the
mhm.
spirit of what needs to be said in your opinion?
Well, it needs to be rephrased in terms that the
Mm.
recipient of the message is concerned with.
Yeah, fair.
And normally we tend to mix in a lot of buzzwords because we think that if we serve them buzzword bingo, they will see the
Mhm.
light. But the
Uh-huh.
thing is, that really isn't it. It's because the thing that you are looking to achieve will fail if we don't do this.
There we
Now,
go.
that is a little bit of a formula right there, but just fill in the blanks, right? So whatever it is that we're talking about, that will fail unless we do this. So always make it we together,
Mhm.
but still, it's not, I cannot do my job if you don't do that.
You got it. So first of all, welcome to everyone who's following on Instagram. Some people are saying hi. Great to see you. Everybody on LinkedIn, sorry, not LinkedIn, but on YouTube and on Facebook Live. Greetings, everybody. Great to see you. So we just arrived at an important point. The first courageous discussion that we have to have, and if we don't have it, we're failing to act with courage. The courage is required to really make this whole thing work. If we don't have the following conversation, which is Mr. Executive, Mr. Leadership Team, sorry, shouldn't say Mr. Mrs. Leader, whomever that may be, team, individual, whatever.
Yes.
If here's the outcome that you want, you're looking for a certain outcome, more revenue, less customer churn, less employee churn. There's a metric or a measure by which you define success, right? And so many people say, "Oh, happy customers is all that matters." Happy customers that don't pay don't matter as much as happy customers that do pay. Repeat business, things that reduce the cost of reacquiring customers that you've lost because you suck at what you do. Those kinds of things matter to the organization. They are paying you as an agile coach, scrum master, or practitioner to deliver on part of that promise. You can't have it if you don't do the following things. I'm going to need you to give me feedback every week. Did I over deliver for you? Did we hit the outcomes that you wanted? Does this feel the way you wanted it to feel? You're looking for change. You're looking for improvement. Are you seeing the change? Are you seeing the improvement? Have you got your hands on something that your gut or your measurements tell you is going to work and continue to work? If not, I'm going to adjust that for you. My job as a coach is to help adapt, pivot, right? So that we can have more of the outcome you're looking for and less of the outcomes that you're not looking for. If we can't have that conversation frequently, this whole thing will fail because we're going to be guessing. You're not going to be giving us the input that's required to improve. We're not going to be talking about what I need to get you that outcome.
Hmm.
So if you tell me, it's not really making a dent yet, now I say to you, okay, either it's going to take a few more weeks, or can we break that outcome into smaller pieces so that we can get a little piece of it in 2 weeks rather than waiting 6 months to see it become real? If we're not having engaged conversations like that, of course the thing's going to fail. So the first component of failure and courage in action is, why are we afraid to go to leaders and say, Mrs. or Mr. Leader, this thing that you want, You aren't going to get it. Your investment in Agile will be wasted unless you are engaged, you are committed, and you are understanding and involved. Because we're happy to blame them when it's all over. Oh, it didn't work. You know why? This
Yeah,
guy.
executives they just weren't involved, and we need that. And actually, I think and every agile class I ever attended, that is actually taught. So if
Mhm,
you have even one certificate at some point, you even signed for knowing this.
mhm,
But the thing is, it's really on us indeed as agile practitioners to, okay, so this needs to happen. But
mhm.
we are the ones who are supposed to make that happen, who are supposed to create an environment where it becomes normal for people to take those steps.
You
The
got it.
one thing I see that we do wrong, I did wrong for ages, um, is we know what agile is. We know how wonderful it is. We
Mhm.
know because it's like it's our mission in life. In my case, it's literally my mission in life.
Right.
However, that doesn't mean that anybody else is at the same level. Actually, let's hope not, because
Mhm.
otherwise we are definitely going to be out of a job in a few years. And of
Yep.
course we are, because
Mhm.
that's just the nature of things. However, while we strive not to, it still makes sense to understand that if your engagement with a certain company or client actually is to make sense, they better not be at your level yet, because
Right.
why would they otherwise hire you? And that
Right.
means that it's on you to situationally communicate. In other words, they don't really know what you're talking about, so you should talk about something else, something they do know,
Yep.
that invites them onto the path to agility. And
Right.
maybe that means that you're first talking how to get more control with this new agile thing. And then when they start to realize, yeah, it's actually not about more control, is it? Good of you to notice. Hey,
Right.
compliment there. That's a
Right.
step forward. Now take the next step.
You got it.
And that requires a little bit deeper insight than just getting all the certificates.
It does. And again, it requires that courage. Here's another more ground level example. So, starting with the leadership team is uncomfortable for you. Let's imagine that I decide that the reason why the team's not moving well this week is because we're baking cookies at 325 degrees. I think the cookies would be so much better if we baked them at 350. So that's an agile approach because we're trying things, we're failing, and we're saying, quite honestly, the cookies aren't as good as they could be. Let's bake them at 350. I think that's a great experiment to try and improve. So you go to your team, you say, I have some feedback for you. They're like, great, we love feedback. Awesome. Cookies at
Mm-hmm.
325 don't taste as good. They're not gooey in the center, they're not crispy on the outside. It's a hot mess. It's not working. So in order to do better, we need to change. We need to change how we bake our cookies.
Mm. And
So people are saying, yes, we want the agility, but we don't want the change. Happens all the time. In order to get better, I want to be more agile. I want the outputs of agile. I want the benefits and all of the promises and what's the word they use on diplomas? Benefits and
mm-hmm.
privileges bestowed upon me and my team. Great. To do that, here's what must be done. We don't want to do that. Okay.
And that is so weird in some
Right.
sense, because why why do we struggle with that so much? And I think it has a lot to do with our own ego, but also with fears.
Hmm.
Because and literal fear.
Hmm.
One of the things that almost nobody does, but you do really consistently, is you give immediate feedback. And
Right.
we have a wonderful example of just seconds ago.
Right.
I managed to say 5 minutes before we started, yeah, might be a little bit late. And of course, if you go live, that's not a good thing. So you
Right.
told me, and we went live anyway. So we
Right.
didn't ponder upon that, but now I know there's a change and I must make.
Right.
It's good that that is communicated, and we should make it a habit to tell each other stuff like that. That's not
Right.
an insult. That's not an attack. That
You
is,
got it.
okay, dude, if you really want to get down with this,
Yeah.
this is what I need you to do. If you're
Right.
going to be late, say 30 minutes in advance, because otherwise we can't prep for this. Now, that is a small example, and that's on purpose,
Right.
because the same thing happens when you deliver a day late to an
Hmm.
executive, or
Hmm.
when you don't show up on time for a call that may not even
You
be
got it.
important, but you signal that the other is not important by being late there.
Right.
That should be immediate feedback. Dude, you can't
Right.
do this. This can't happen. If you really want to be on top of your game, you just have to step up.
We
And
need
that
to do
is
better. Yeah.
and actually that is love. It may be tough love sometimes,
Hmm.
but that's the only way to ever get better.
You got it. And it could be, by the way, it could be self-love too, because there's also, I'm working on another project right now where I'm the bottleneck. I'm looking at a chunk of time where I'm supposed to be doing something and I'm just out of energy. I'm struggling. So I need to go to my counterpart who's counting on me and say, dude, I need you to come in here and push because for whatever reason, I'm not finding it and I need to be better. So we have to be equally comfortable pressing ourselves, pressing each other, and saying, these cookies don't taste great. I think we should try something different. What then happens is that people say, yeah, don't want to do that. Why don't we want to do that? Well,
It's
because
uncomfortable.
I don't like the idea of saying the cookies don't taste good. Could we refresh? So the number one thing that starts happening is people are concerned about the impact of the language. What does it mean to them? Ego. What does it mean to the organization? Which is there's a perfect example of failure of courage in action right there. There's something that needs to be said, but I don't want to say it because I'm afraid.
Mm.
I'm afraid of offending somebody. Well, look, so we can sit there and say the cookies are suboptimal. Hmm. Interesting. What's a suboptimal cookie mean? I'm not sure. It's deflated the message.
It's the one that you're then not eating, which
Yeah,
makes having produced them even worse.
exactly. The point is we haven't hit a target. So however you want to reword or wordsmith or rescript the word, we missed our target. If we take all of the air out of it, if we take the edge off the blade, it's not going to have the impact that we want to have. We need to learn how to say that with love and respect so that it's not a problem to hear that. But that's a huge struggle for organizations. So we fail to say what needs to be said because we're worried about how it will be received, or we worry about what the change will mean.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody, I mean, nobody wants to sign up for a move on the chessboard, right? That sinks the boat. Which is why in the waterfall days, we used to get 50 signatures on something because it meant diffusion of responsibility, which from a psych perspective,
Mm.
this is a big deal for people.
And we
The more
still do that,
signatures
right?
that are on it, sure. The more signatures are on, it's like, wasn't me. If this fails, wasn't me. Remember, in Agile, we have such great tools to minimize the cost of failure. We shouldn't be seeking signatures, the anti-boat sinking signatures, because we can say, if this fails, in a week, we'll know and we'll do differently. Right. So as coaches, it's our job to say, listen, let's move. There's so many times as a coach, I've had to say, if this blows up, point at me, blame me. I want the blame.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're off the hook. Sometimes as an agile leader, you can remove the 50 signature process simply by saying, if this blows up, tell them it was my idea, because I'll handle the relationship with the executive team, the leadership team that requires the courage. But sooner or later, people have to find it for themselves, because if they only have courage when you step in and deliver it, the team won't grow. So I'll stop there.
Indeed.
Lawrence, what are your experiences with
Um,
getting courage down to the team level?
well, the thing, actually, the one that you described just now is something that rings true to me. It's really good to show how courage works by going first. So, leading from the front, so to speak, you go in and then you tell everybody, indeed, it's on me. It's safe to follow. And then immediately turn around, look at who followed first,
Right.
and then work with them to
Yep.
also become comfortable with doing that. Now,
Hmm.
I am highly uncomfortable with doing that because one of the things I always struggled with, and I notice a lot of people struggle with, is the language. So a lot of people seem to think that speaking truth to power also requires being blunt and being disrespectful,
Hmm.
because otherwise you can't speak truth. And
Right.
that is actually not true. It requires
Exactly.
practice. You'll probably be
Hmm.
perceived as being blunt and being disrespectful while you find your footage there.
You
But if
got
you
it.
find footing, sorry, footage is something else.
Hmm.
But when you find your footing, it is, you can experiment your way around to the end result, which is being able to speak truth to power without that even being perceived as a negative. And
Yeah.
that is actually achievable. And it's much easier than you think, because in my
Hmm.
experience, when I started just walking into executive offices, which I thought was impossible because you need to make an appointment and all that stuff, and just telling them what I saw, or just popping in and saying, I have this concern and I need 5 minutes. Do you have 5 minutes? They always
Yep.
say yes. Get a cup of
Yep.
coffee. And then I
Hmm.
just share my concern, really, but really matter of factly. This is what I see. This is what I'm afraid will happen. What do you think?
Yep.
And then usually either they give a tip, which is the I can't be bothered with this moment, or
Right.
they decide to step in. And now all of a sudden you've made happen that one of the bosses steps in and throws down their weight. Now, that's
Right.
not always appreciated, but it's always really effective.
Yes. Yes, it is. And I'll add something to that. Maybe this will help you, or maybe this will work for you. But when I jump into conversations like that, I may have to preface it with, listen, you've hired me as an agile expert to know what to do in situations where things are difficult. So there's some things that you need to hear that won't be easy to hear or may not be palatable. This is a crucial moment in which I need you to accept it, hear it, realize that this is not an ego thing. It's not about you. This is not an indication. It's not a criticism. This is simply information, information that I need you to react to tactically so that we can move the dial and do differently. Are you comfortable with me bringing you that feedback? Because the alternate to that answer is no. Me, Mrs. or Mr. grown up leader with all these different, MBA certificates and qualifications, I'm not comfortable hearing the truth. So again, in their minds, you've just opened up a door saying, we can either go this way or we can go this way. This way would be a complete ego based defense mechanism and a prime example of absence of courage. Feel like going there? I mean, it's under, you never say that, but I feel like it's got to be under the hood. Or do you want to lead your team right now? Right? Do you want to do something inspiring and something that most agile um, executives fear to do? I
What
believe
I
you have it
like,
in you. Go ahead.
what I like about what you just said, and it's something that's easily missed, but I'm of course tuned to those details
Mhm.
because I'm learning also. Is you said something to the effect of, after saying this is what we need, this is what we need to be talking about,
Mhm.
you just ask something along the lines of, is that something that you're good with?
Right.
In other words, you're asking a real stop loss there. So
Right.
this line of conversation, are you comfortable with it? Because
Right.
that's essentially what you do. And if they then say no, then it's a good time to pull back a little and maybe
You
just
got it.
have a conversation around that.
Right.
What makes you hesitant? What do you feel comfortable with?
Right.
That maintains respect while also maintaining full clarity.
Agreed. Just as we're hitting the 22-minute mark here on our second stab at this one for the day, we got more recordings to make for y'all, but I want to start rounding to a point. And that point is, if any of these conversations sound difficult for you, like, hey, team, I think we've overbaked or underbaked the cookies. They don't taste great. Or to my leadership team saying, we have a failure here. We have a lack of support, which we know causes ultimate agile breakdown. Do you want to hear so that you can react, act, lead, facilitate? Those kinds of conversations, if either of those sound scary to you, here's what I need you to know. Everything that we do in Agile, and by the way, you can remove the word Agile, just cross it out, put life, put success, put performance. I don't care what word you like to use, requires constantly being comfortable with the uncomfortable. So if you expected that an Agile coach would simply be able to drum up some application that will have the steps for you, that will have a really great ticketing system for you, that will make work visible for you, that will facilitate remote stand-ups for you, that will facilitate ongoing communication, cross-functional, work. It's not going to happen. All of this is difficult. If it were easy, everyone would do it and we wouldn't be necessary and all companies would be making as much money as they wanted at all times with no problems. Agile is about moving from where we are and what we do habitually to new places. All of those things involve human fear, doubt, ego, all of those other nasty things, and it gets worse and more amplified at scale. So, guess what? If you want to do this well, you have to get good at being comfortable with the uncomfortable. That's the job, 100%. So, the reason why we called this week's episode that agile failure is always a failure of courage in action is that it starts with you. You have to be the person who is willing to speak truth to power, even though it's really uncomfortable, really difficult. You have to be the one that says things to your team that can be hard to hear. Don't worry if you're not perfect at it out of the gate. The only way to get better is what? I mean, how do you build muscle? You tear it down so that as it repairs itself, it comes back stronger. That's the only way to get better at courage. But if you get better at it, imagine the kind of leader that you become. Imagine the trust you can build with clients, teams, executives. Imagine the leadership, the way that people will defer to you when they're looking for someone who knows what to do. Like the boat is sinking, we're scared. Who knows who's the person that we go to? Who knows what to do, how to get us out of this? And imagine what it could do in terms of your track record, the stories that you can tell. Oh my God. Once you learn that every day is about getting uncomfortable, you got it. The
People
sooner
will
you
start
can
to
start.
see you as a natural leader. And
Exactly.
leaders go first.
Always. Always. All right. Any questions from the crew, guys? So great to see you out there on Instagram. I'm sorry, I'm constantly trying to keep my phone from stopping the feed.
Ah,
What do we got? We got Mike Karen was here. He said, "Bring the fire, C Dub." I mean, that's what I do. You know me, right? Anyone else
Martin
got some?
in there as well. Maybe
Who's in
Martin
there?
has a question. Martin,
Let's go.
but he may have left already. You never know.
He may have. Let's see who else is live. I'm just going to check the comments feed real quick and see if we have anything here. I don't think we had anything come
Hmm.
through. However, I want to thank you guys for joining today. We're going to do this again next week, maybe even before. We'll try and do these more often. So, what do we have here? Being of feeling uncomfortable. I'm
I
not
think
sure if there was a question there. Lawrence, what did you catch?
it's probably being or feeling uncomfortable. It's actually being uncomfortable or feeling uncomfortable.
Got it. So, it's, you know what? It's both. Uncomfortable. Discomfort is a feeling,
Hmm.
right? I'm not talking about physical discomfort where you jab a pencil in your teeth, kind of uncomfortable. I mean, uncomfortable in terms of your physical reaction to what? Unknown,
Hmm.
uncertain, unpleasant,
Cool.
things that we think might cost us our job, our reputation,
Something
trust.
interesting by means of how to practice this pops up in my head.
Sure.
That we actually practiced in the forge at some point.
Mhm.
I hate rain. At least I hate
Mhm.
being in it while it's
Mhm.
actually raining. So one of my missions was when it rains, go out and take a walk. Exactly the thing I don't want to do.
Yep.
Practice being uncomfortable. Now, the fun thing is, by practicing something stupidly simple like that, I mean,
Mhm.
I apparently, miraculously, I didn't die by walking in the rain.
Right.
And so I got back, I survived, and then it became easier to talk truth to power because
Yep.
that's really how it works. It's like a
Yep.
muscle. If you train
You
being
got it.
uncomfortable, it doesn't really matter. Take cold showers, walk in the rain, practice being uncomfortable, and then you can essentially walk into the lion's den and then tell them, look, dudes, I know what you're doing, but this is not working.
Right. Right. And it's funny because it's different for other people. If I say to you, Lawrence, there's 10 of us going to the drive-in tonight, would you like to come? For some people, saying yes to social situations is the discomfort. So the right thing to do is to say yes. For other people who overcommit and say yes to too many things, the right thing and the uncomfortable thing is to say no. So it takes time and discernment, which you can only develop through practice, to know what is the actual growth. Where's the growth for you? So that
Mm-hmm.
requires some introspection and knowing where your shortfalls are, your gaps. That's a whole other conversation. Anyway, guys, we're going to wrap up for today. Let's see what we got here, especially the dudes part.
He's calling me out in my language. Should be better about that. Of
Well,
course,
we
I
can
also
call
mean
it dudes applies
yes.
to all people, right? It knows no boundaries. If the same with the word badass, right? So
Well, that for sure.
I can't buy ads on Twitter because people say that your title, the name of your business, includes foul language, foul or offensive language, because it has the word ass in it. You know, ass is one of those things that to me is not necessarily vulgar, but
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I digress. The point is that we assume I also had some feedback from someone the word badass implies male. I'm like, how's that? Because I know tons of podcasters who have badass somewhere in their name. There's the Jen Sincero books where the word badass actually
When
written
I
by a
when I
female, probably for a female audience too.
when I think about a badass and I think about a badass in the Netherlands, you know who I'm thinking about, and
Yeah, I
she's
do.
definitely not male.
She is definitely not. Anyway, but there is an example, by the way. If we're so afraid of offending someone and we remove a word from our lexicon or remove an action from our inventory because we're afraid that it's not the right way to say something, that's a prime example. Wordsmithing is a prime example of a failure of courage in action. Not to call out anyone in the audience, but you have to watch for that. When you're in an org, people say just before we say what we need to say, let's just wait and make sure that the words are right. A certain amount of caution is wise. However, there's a point where caution is hesitation and procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be honest. So, finding the balance between the two is really the act of courage. And how do you learn that? Again, I could give you a guide, I could give you a script, I could give you a tool, I could give you an app, or just go do it. Be comfortable being wrong. I screwed up this week. I had to throw some courage down. So I did what I thought was right. And everyone was like, woo. And they buried it and they hid it and they responded with a bad rash and it threw everyone off for a day or two. But it was still the right thing to do. Even if it didn't move the dial, I had to experiment. I had to go push my edges. And I encourage you to do the same. Okay, so check out episode 180, Failure of Courage in Action, because I really believe that that's where all agile success and failure actually lies. Thank you guys so much for tuning in on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook, wherever you happen to be joining from. I'm glad you're here today. Lawrence, thank you so much for being my co-host, my partner in crime, for saying what needs to be said. I appreciate
Thank
you,
you,
dude.
Chris.
And we'll catch you next time.